Hello and welcome to this video. The purpose of this video is to help you as mentees to unlock your potential through the CUBO scheme. So we'll be talking today through some answers to some typical questions that people ask about being a mentee, how to be a mentee, how to get the most out of the relationship. We'll also be hearing from some CUBO mentors who are very experienced, and they will be talking about both from their perspective as being a mentor, but also being a mentee. What are some of the most important skills and things that you need to do in order to be set up for success and to get the most out of the experience? My name is Juliet Sabo-Meriju. I'm an experienced mentor and mentee, and I've had the pleasure of working with some amazing mentees and some amazing mentors over my career. So I look forward to answering some of these typical questions with you today. So let's get started. First things first, the CUBO scheme has been identified and developed as a unique opportunity for all of us as members. And within that, it's very much about helping you to achieve your potential, whether it's about reaching the next level, so progressing up in your career, whether it's about increasing the impact in your existing role, or actually about transforming services, transforming the experience that students and staff have on campus. Whatever it might be, no doubt it's also about being curious, how other universities might do things, and learning from others who've walked the path that you're about to walk. So with that in mind, let's think about the kind of things that you could develop as a mentee. I know over the course of my career, I've had a number of mentors in all sorts of areas of my work. I've had people that have helped me to understand the sector. So when I first came from outside HE into the HE sector, I worked with a mentor who helped me to understand the history, the politics, which we all know much of in the HE, the context in which we work, the policy discussions and debates that are going on in the sector. And I found that immensely useful to understand and to navigate the sector. Perhaps that's something that you're looking for, that you'd like to be able to understand how to progress your existing role or progress your team, or move up to the next level by having a better understanding of what's happening in the sector and some of the kind of history and politics of it. Or perhaps it's about expertise. Perhaps actually what you're really looking for is more around having a deep subject matter knowledge and working with a mentor who's either acquired significant qualifications or a mentor who's really been able to amass lots and lots of insight and information because they've done so much over the course of their career and they've needed to become deep subject matter experts. Perhaps that's the case for you. You're maybe in a new role where you haven't got quite as much depth of expertise that you'd like to have, or you're thinking about going for a role, or you've got a project which requires that expertise, whatever it might be. Alternatively, perhaps it's about experience. Perhaps there are some things that you're coming across at this point in your career, in your role, and you've never come across them before, and you'd like to work them through and talk them through with a mentor who's been there before. Perhaps you're having some particular challenges, or there's some particularly scary or difficult things that you're having to do, which you'd value the perspective of an experienced person. Or alternatively, it may be about just developing some really key skills. Perhaps there are certain aspects of what you do and how you do them when you think, actually, I could probably benefit from somebody teaching me, mentoring me around how to do this. I know certainly when I started my career, I worked very closely with somebody who was amazing at writing reports and writing board papers. I'd just become a director. And so I identified that as something that I wanted to do, was to work with a mentor who could show me and advise me and guide me as to how I would start writing these more formal reports and board papers. But likewise, I've also worked with people who've given me vast experience I never had before. I know when I did my first organizational restructure, I was quite scared and quite a people-focused type person, and I was worried about some of the implications of that. So I worked with a very experienced manager who showed me how to go through the process of managing that sort of situation. But at the same time, in terms of expertise, when I first had a budget, I had to find a mentor, somebody who could show me how to actually start constructing a budget, managing a budget, reporting on a budget. I still don't have expertise, but I have the level of expertise that I needed, because that mentor was able to meet me where I was at that point in time and to give me the insights that I needed. So first and foremost, probably one of the key things when you start thinking about starting a mentoring relationship is saying, what do I really most want to be able to develop? And it may be that you come up with several things, and you might well need a different mentor depending on whatever it is. Alternatively, you might decide actually, perhaps it's not about having a mentor at all, because there's lots of different development options that you could go to develop different aspects of your career. So mentoring is quite specific, and I'll come to mentoring last, but if you look at something like buddying, for example, a really great development option, much more informal, much more probably just having a sounding board, somebody to vent at, perhaps when you're going through a particularly challenging situation, but somebody who's there in a non-judgmental space who can talk on a very casual basis. They might have never experienced what it is you're trying to achieve, but they can be there and to be an emotional and a support for you in some way. It could alternatively be about reflective practice, actually, rather than a mentor. You actually might want to have an opportunity in quite a disciplined way to be taking the time out to think about what's happening, analyze what's driving it, and then working out what your next steps might need to be. But actually, just by carving out that time to do some reflective practice might be the right option for you. Alternatively, it might be about research methods. Actually, you might be trying to do something that requires you to really understand something and to see the data and to do some research. So it might be that about actually taking that route, doing a research route, doing a desk-based research and analysis route would be the right thing for you. Alternatively, it might be coaching. So there, typically in the coaching setup, the coach might well have not done what you've done before, what you're wanting to do, but what they're trying to do is help you to achieve really stretching goals, and they're providing a framework for you to be able to think differently about how you approach things. Mentoring, though, is quite specific because it is based on the premise that the person who's mentoring has done it before, so they can really draw on their expertise and their experience on having taken steps and failed and learned from the experience, and they can share with you from that place of having done it before, having the scars and having the experience of being able to try things and knowing what works and what doesn't. So if you're looking to be able to follow in somebody else's footsteps and to be able to draw on them as somebody who can speak from their expertise, from their skill set and from their experience, then mentoring for sure will be the right thing for you to do. So how do you find a mentor then? Once you've decided you want to work alongside following in somebody else's footsteps, you start with your objectives. You start with a clear sense of what it is you're trying to achieve. Where are you trying to get to? Why does it matter? And then once you've got that, you've got a clear sense of the kind of expertise and the kind of experience that you need from a mentor, you can then start to go through the chemistry session. So you'll have entered your information as part of your profile on the CUBO website, and then you'll be able to get visibility of the profiles of the mentors who are available. You'll be able to search through them and then let CUBO know so that they can set up a chemistry session. And the purpose of the chemistry session is twofold, really. Firstly, to check that what it is you're trying to develop, your objectives, align with their areas of expertise. But secondly, to get a sense of whether you feel comfortable in this person's, presence in terms of, to what extent does it feel as though you can learn from them? How open do you feel? Maybe even on a practical basis, are they going to be available in the period that you've got in mind? In some cases, there may be a time frame that you're working to and you're looking to be able to learn something before a certain point in time further down the road. So we're also talking about availability and checking that it's going to be practical for both of you is absolutely key. Once you've actually got a match, then you'd start to kind of think about how do the sessions actually work. And in these sessions, typically you're going to be having about 6 to 8 sessions over a course of 9 to 12 months. And every session will be fairly informal, but there is a bit of a structure to it. So a looser structure than probably things like coaching, but still you're likely to start out towards the beginning of the session, checking in, seeing how you're both doing, catching up on what's been happening. And you'll move to looking back and looking back on what you talked about last time, any key actions you had last time, and talking about what you've learned through the process of applying those actions and experimenting with the things that you learned together in the last session. Once you've done that, you'll start to look forward and you'll start to talk about the area that you'd like to particularly focus on for the given session. With that, you'll then start to examine that area. You start to examine reality, get to the heart of what's happening, how long has it been happening, what would you like to happen in the future, why does it matter, what are the biggest obstacles. Once you've got clarity around the reality and you're clear on where it is you're trying to get to, you'll probably start to talk about options. So what are the different things that you could try in order to overcome or to shift that reality? Towards the end of the session, you'll finish with some sort of commitment to action, even if it's simply just to keep thinking about what you've discussed, to reflect further on what you've discussed, or maybe even to actually try something out, to take a certain approach and to adapt the way that you approach something. So a bit of a general sense of any mentoring session, that's essentially what you're going to be covering over the course of the time that you'll have together. Getting the most out of those sessions, though, can depend on preparation. And again, one of the things when I ask mentors, what really sets apart the mentees who really thrive and the ones that probably thrive less, they talked about preparation quite a lot. And I've divided this into two aspects. So firstly, preparing mentally and preparing from a practical perspective. So firstly, thinking about, from a mental perspective, being clear on the area of focus and some key questions that you want to explore. You might want to even send those questions to the mentor in advance so that they also have a chance to kind of think about those questions. Thinking about any sort of specific skills or knowledge or experiences that you want to examine with a mentor. Perhaps they mentioned something last time and you want to dig into that because you think it might be relevant to the area of focus for the given session. But as well, clearing your mind so that you're focused and you can really make the most of what the mentor has to say. No doubt you'll have a long to-do list, you'll have all sorts of other priorities, and there is something here about just setting it aside, leaving it there for a second so that you can really focus in the session with the mentor. And then from a practical perspective, letting the mentor know what you'd like to focus on, having a look at the actual notes from the last session, I think it's quite helpful. And maybe do some research so that you are ready to ask some fairly targeted questions. You may decide that it's practical to send your mentor something, perhaps 5 minutes preparation only for them rather than burdening them too much, but perhaps there's something you'd want to send them that they could look at in advance of the session as well. Okay, so now you're fully prepared. Let's think about some of the skills that are most important for mentees. It is incredible how often when I ask people, the people who are really experienced mentors, what is it that makes the biggest difference? They talked about preparation, which we've just covered now, but they also talked about these three things here: curiosity, analysis, and application. In the curiosity space, a lot there around challenging your assumptions. So not going in with a fixed mindset, but being open to rethinking things and challenging the way that you approach things. At the same time, challenging any self-limiting beliefs you might have about your own capability and your own potential. So being curious about your own potential and being able to ask open questions. So asking questions that really open up opportunities and open up possibilities as much as possible, as opposed to asking closed questions, which essentially just confirm your existing beliefs and assumptions. And then with that, what you do with that around analysis. So whatever you're curious about, you'll have lots of useful and hopefully helpful information. And it's about what you do with that to get to the root cause, being able to think quite critically, being able to work out what the blockages are and what the accelerators are, being able to distill it down to some common trends or some opportunities that might be present. So not leaving the mentoring conversation at a fairly superficial level, but being able to really kind of probe and really kind of surface some of the key aspects of whatever it is you're trying to achieve. Most importantly, though, I'd argue, is application, because it's amazing to have a wonderful, broad, interesting conversation and then being able to deepen it to get to the nub of the issues. But you've got to be able to try it out and to do something differently as a result of it. And the mentees that really are going to get the most of it are the ones that are willing to experiment, the ones that can be reflective and can take the time to think about what they're doing, thinking about what's working out what they could do differently in the future. And then also taking that insight and saying, so what can I scale up? What can I scale out and use in different contexts so that I'm transferring my experiences and transferring my expertise and my skills across lots of different domains in my work and in my career. So curiosity, analysis, and application. Let's hear from Rebecca. She talks about what makes a great mentee from her perspective.
I think those who are open to change and who are open to learning new things, who are willing to do what I called the work. And what I mean by that, it doesn't necessarily mean your day-to-day role and doing the responsibilities aligned with your role. Sometimes actually to get better in a certain area, you might have to read a bit of content, you might have to listen to a podcast, you might have to go to talk to somebody else in your organisation or university. You might have to become a bit more inquisitive, learn more about the sector that you're in. All those things help you set yourself apart from the next person and the area of progression that you want to go to. So I call that the work, because no one's going to do it for you.
And also Melissa.
So passionate about this bit is
Good.
also mentees that can celebrate themselves.
Yeah.
Take a moment to actually celebrate, because it's so easy to say, I've done that and move on. But actually, some of my favorite sessions with people is us just going, yay, whoop, whoop, sort of thing. Like, isn't that brilliant? Now let's go to stage 2, like that type of, like you've done like a game and you're going to the next level. So being able to self-reflect and also to be able to celebrate their successes too.
And Jim?
I think it is just be open to new things.
Brilliant.
Be open to be challenged, and be brave.
So how will you know when you're done? Well, you will. You will have done a certain number of sessions with your mentor. If you've set yourself up for success at the start of the relationship, you've probably put a set of sessions in the diary in advance. And you'll have probably had a final review session where you've looked back, you've thought about what you've learned. I guess fundamentally, you'll have got to a point where you've made some progress against those original objectives and you're ready to fly and to give things a go and to experiment on your own wings, I guess, rather than relying on a mentor. And that's how you'll know. And you'll agree with your mentor that you have the review session. And no doubt you will stay in touch. No doubt you will continue to be in contact in the future. As you really look to use what you've learned from the experience. Great. Thank you so much for listening. I hope it's useful. All the best.